So crypto realized vol continuing higher this week. You can see that these yellow lines continue to trade up. Although Bitcoin did pull back from its highs back down here, Ethereum continued to charge. We saw that big rip on Valentine's Day above 50K, but then Bitcoin stalled after that. ETH, though, finding its feet and marching towards 3,000. Realized vol up to 50% in ETH. Implied's moving up as well. You can see the weekly and the monthly going higher in both assets. Now, that is typical to see spot vol correlation in crypto to be positive, so nothing really new there. Volatility carry has remained positive. It's more positive in Bitcoin than it is in ETH, just because Bitcoin is not realizing as much. And then, apart from NVIDIA earnings this week, which I think will set the tone for stock markets, we don't really have a lot on the macro front, right? We've got some minutes out of the FOMC. We've got crypto obviously decoupling last week based on the ETF flows. But I think if those flows calm down a bit this week and stocks have a correction, then we may see some near-term downside on crypto. But the big support levels to keep on your radar are going to be 50K on Bitcoin and 2,700 on Ethereum. All right, that's realized vol. If we look at the term structures, what do we see? We can see shifting a little bit higher. Front end not doing too much on Bitcoin as it wasn't realizing crazy. But if we go from sort of middle part of the curve and out, we were up about 2 or 3 vol points as we kind of traded higher. The skew curve steepening, seeing a bit of a fade in shorter dated call skew by about 2 or 3 points, and then that long end being stable. You can see similar moves in Ethereum getting really dragged up more by the back end vols. You've got June and April, kind of the most bid part, up about 5.5 vols. But the back end still up 4 vols on Ethereum, and even the front end in Ethereum holding up just because the gamma has been performing better. So about a 3 to 5 volt increase across the curve. And if we look at what the skew's doing, we're getting even more steepening. So we're getting front end call skew down by about 3 to 4, back end up by about 2 to 3. So we're getting really, really steep skew curve in terms of Ethereum, much more so than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's like 3 vols in the front out to 6, 7. Whereas you've got about 1 vol in the front on ETH out to about 9. So a much steeper call skew across the term structure there in Ethereum. Now, what does that say to us? In terms of skew, it kind of says to us, jump over to skew. So obviously, as we broke higher, the skew went deeper into call premium initially, but then faded as we stalled. Through Bitcoin skew fading in the calls is kind of probably indicating that, yes, people are taking a bit of profit on short-end calls, so we may stall out a little bit here. The Ethereum skew, similar sort of story in terms of the front end, but really that's just overwriting supply just keeps coming, right? Even if people blast through their call strikes that they sold, they buy them back and sell something closer to the money that's got time value on it that's going to decay if the market does nothing. So that's kind of how these overwriters are operating. They are still selling, but they're rolling their strikes up a bit faster and a bit more actively, it seems. Now, in the long end of the curve, that 8 to 9 vol premium in call skew in ETH is just signifying that there is clearly a big fundamental story there, a big supply shock story on ETH to come. It's a deflationary asset already, but when these ETFs come, there's potentially even more supply going to be taken out of the game. So people getting positioned for that, buying longer dated upside in ETH, and certainly not wanting to sell that stuff as much. Okay. So that's what we're seeing there. On the relative value side, again, similar story, seeing that little uptick in Ethereum, taking that spread higher. So front end already trading at about 6 vol premium. Back end was trading closer to flat, is starting to rally there in the kind of 6-month bucket. So that whole back end of the curve starting to shift higher. Realized vol doing pretty well, over 10 vol premium there on 10-day realized Ethereum this week. You can see here, on the long-term chart, though, in the 1-month stuff, we're still only at about 5 vols, and this stuff can easily go 10 or even more if the moves start to justify it, right? So don't be surprised if that is what we see. Longer dated call switches we still like. We don't think anything like 2 or 3 vols. We don't think that's expensive, so we still do like owning longer dated ETH calls and maybe funding them with Bitcoin calls. But to be honest, with this bullish dynamic in crypto markets being so strong right now, just owning the Ethereum upside either via calls or call spreads, you don't really need to sell Bitcoin against it and get yourself into a spread trade, and then that might that might get you in a pickle if Bitcoin has a really strong week and outperforms. So I'm not convinced the switches are really necessary, given how well supported this crypto market seems to be right now. I think you can just hold some premium in the longer end of the curve and be happy with that, to be honest. Okay. Now I do think a short-term consolidation after such a strong thrust is likely, but as I already said, 50K on Bitcoin, 2,700, those should act as some kind of support. If this thing really is as strong as we think it is, then you'd expect the buyers to already re-enter and come back in at those sort of levels. Okay, what else? Both dashboards are in sell calls right now in terms of strategy compass. I wouldn't sell them outright, but yeah, overwriting against some holdings or certainly taking profit on some ETH calls, I think makes a lot of sense given that we've hit the 3K target. So, and the vol's pretty pumped. So yeah, that does make sense to me, but I wouldn't really be looking to go short, to be honest. I just think you've got to believe in this rally, and I don't see why you want to fight it given the way it's trading. Okay, so volumes, BTC option flows were up 40% this week as it broke through 50K and sucked in more call activity, call buying, rolling, etc. The general themes in the flow were rolling up February and March in the money calls into higher strikes. We did also see a little bit of post-rally, post-Valentine's Day massacre protection buying. So we saw put spreads being bought in March, saw puts in Feb, and we also saw some straddles getting bought in March in 52K and 53K. In terms of the upside stuff that traded, really June calls quite in vogue, 60 to 80K range calls getting bought in June. See that in those orange bars on the chart. And that's pretty much it, really. We also saw March upside getting bought via call spreads, deep, like far out the money stuff, people rolling up to 65K, 75K call spreads, and also selling some April, March calendars as another way of getting long some upside if it does rally in the next month or so. All right, that is your flows on Bitcoin. In terms of Ethereum, volume's up massive, up about 100, 110% to about $4 billion notional as spot went to 3K. Calls getting lifted, mainly Feb and March to gain exposure to the move and get some gamma on board. We saw the 2,800 calls covered in Feb. Those were in the money and higher strikes sold. So like that rolling up of short calls. In terms of directional, we saw 3,000, 3,500 call spreads getting bought in March. Also saw March, April calendar sellers similar to the Bitcoin trade. And then something that stood out was February crash protection. That literally expires this Friday. And someone felt the need to buy a chunk of February 2,200 puts on Ethereum. So it feels a little bit far out the money. You know, when we're trading here at like 2,900, I mean, the thing needs to drop like 35% to get there. No, what is it? It's 700 points. Yeah, over 20% to get there. I don't know. I don't really know what the rationale for that is. That seems a little bit too far to be worth doing. I think you'd be better off, if you're listening, whoever did that trade, I think you'd be better off doing something a little bit longer dated and maybe doing put spreads if you think the vol's expensive. But buying those outright options that are that far out the money, I mean, seems a little bit crazy. Maybe it's a margin thing. Maybe you had to do it to solve margin issues. But yeah, it doesn't look like the most rational trade I've seen in crypto lately. Okay, not insulting anyone, just giving you the benefit of my experience and how I would think about it. Anyway, gamma positioning, we did see a continuation of the fall. So we pretty much got Bitcoin dealer gamma at the lows that we've seen over the last couple of months. Big short strikes coming in this Friday at 50 and 52K. It's not like this is necessarily, I mean, whenever we see these big concentrations of short strikes, they don't often necessarily lead to loads of extra realized vol. I mean, certainly if there's a catalyst for the market to move, it's not gonna pin it here. But actually, these do often act as goalposts for the market. So you might find 50-52 range actually holding for the rest of this week because there's so much optionality here, and maybe it's getting rolled and it's getting kind of gradually unwound throughout the week, and that creates the pressure to kind of keep the market around here. So I don't necessarily think we're going to break down materially below 50K. In terms of ETH dealer gamma, it did bounce back to small positive after touching negative last week. the big short strike is 3,000. We do have long wings against that. So the overall positioning, again, is pretty flat to small long on ETH, so nothing really to write home about. Again, I wouldn't be overly surprised to see us hanging at around 3,000, but like I said, I do think that was the first interim target. I'm expecting a bit of consolidation, so I'm probably gun to my head thinking Bitcoin kind of drifts its way back to 50K. Ethereum pulls back to somewhere between 27 and 2,800. And if it can find some support there, then the next leg higher is coming later, maybe sometime in March, I guess. Okay, maybe once that upgrade goes through. Not that that upgrade is necessarily always a bullish catalyst to price, right? That's the summary for this week in crypto. Thanks a lot. As always, I'll catch you guys later.